Welcome back. We are in the second of our 5-session series on Water, Water Everywhere, and Who Cares as part of the Quest Learning Program sponsored by the Community Foundation of Upper St. Clair. Last week we had the pleasure of Ben Wright talking about watersheds, defining them, and of course we all remember what watershed we're sitting in right now. Thank you very much. So we learned a lot about what watersheds are, how they're defined, and how what happens at one end affects what happens at the other end. So we're all linked together. This afternoon in our second program, we are very pleased to have our watershed and your wallet. And we are going to have Ruth Ann Omer, who is the president of Gateway Engineers, and she is also the township engineer for USC Township. She is, for Gateway Engineers, they represent 38 total municipalities as township engineers. Ruth Ann, in all her spare time, represents 9 municipalities. I've had the pleasure of working with Ruth Ann over the years. She has served as both, the whole Gateway Engineers has served as municipal engineers as well as land development. So this young lady to my left knows the full picture of what municipal engineering is all about and how what we do in our watersheds is impacted. Just very quickly about Ruth Ann, who did not bring her bio, which I had asked her to do because this is a woman of many great accomplishments. Very quickly, she has been the national president of the Women's Engineering Society. She was the first woman president in 80 years of the Pennsylvania Society of Professional Engineers. She is the daughter of Fred Omer, who was the founder of Gateway Engineers and who was a previous township engineer for Upper St. Clair, so it must run in the family. And just as a final point of her experience as a Girl Scout, she was one of the original members of the Girl Scout troop that founded the Recycling Center, which I'm sure many of us can remember was just down on McLaughlin Run. So this afternoon, I would like to welcome Ruth Ann, and she is going to discuss, as I mentioned, watersheds and your wallet. And she is going to talk about how we don't plan single watersheds at a time. We cross our watershed boundaries, and with that, I turn it over to Ruth Ann.
Thank you. Thank you, Eric. Well, let me get settled here so that we can make sure we can get this recorded. But thank you very much for inviting me. I never pass up an opportunity to talk. As my team at Gateway knows, sometimes my municipal clients tell me to stop for a while. So, and I really don't, I think you can hear me in the back. If you can't, just raise your hand because I'm used to talking at municipal meetings. And my father always taught me, they may not like what you say, but make sure they can hear you all the way in the back. That'll make them matter. I would like to introduce my registered surveyor who's in the back, Mr. Skip Hadzima, who is the person who prepares all these maps, does all my geographic information systems and GIS, GPS, the global with the satellites. And in his spare time, he is my husband. My father thought that was a perfect union, engineer and surveyor. Was that or a contractor? And I wasn't going for the contractor, no disrespect. But I've been doing this a long time. My father's idea of babysitting was to take me out when I was 5 years old on all the construction sites. And my mother has, this is my mother here, Joan, who has no idea the places I was when I was 5 years old. So it's basically all I've ever known. I've been around sanitary sewers and storm sewers and land development and parks and roads my whole life and working with people. And that's really why I became a township engineer, a municipal, is I like working with people. The smaller jobs, working on the flooding and the roads that people don't really notice, but when I drive by, I know that I worked on that and it's an accomplishment. Today I hope to teach you a little bit more about watersheds. And I don't want to be the bearer of bad news. I'm here to talk about watersheds and our wallet. But to start off with, I understand all of you are better than me at this point educational-wise on watersheds. So you cannot answer. I'm not so sure I'm going to let you answer either. Who in the room can tell me what they think a watershed is? Anybody? Want to give it a try? Even if it's wrong, didn't you talk about watersheds a little bit last week? Okay, does a watershed involve water? Let's start with that. Would you agree with that? And did you learn that a watershed, the water falls from the sky, wherever it hits the ground, and it flows to a stream or a creek, And that's where almost all the watersheds in the county have gotten their name. For example, you are in, as you knew in the beginning, McLaughlin Run watershed. What's the stream running back here? McLaughlin Run. If you lived in Painters Run watershed, which is over by, does anyone remember where Walt's Tavern used to be? That's Painters Run Creek, Painters Run watershed. Brush Run watershed, which is over in Brush Run off of Boyce Road, and Chartiers Creek watershed. These are the maps of the watersheds, and I brought them. The largest watershed in the township is McLaughlin. This is Painters Run I talked about with Walt's Tavern. We come down here and we have Brush Run, which involves Dilford Manor. And then we have Chartiers Creek, which is along here, which guess where that flows to? Chartiers Creek, which then flows down through past Bridgeville and all the way down to the main Chartiers Creek, as they call it, which almost becomes a river. But my speech is entitled The Watershed in Your Wallet. I have to ask you to bear with me. I had a little technical difficulty, so I printed out my presentation. But if you want to just follow along, I'll try and go through it, and I'll try and stick to the agenda. I tend to go off on tangents at different times. But a watershed, if you wanted to cheat, all you had to do was turn to the second page. And a watershed is the entire region or area drained by a river or other body of water, whether natural or artificial. And we have, as I said, 4 watersheds. Now, the one thing that you have to understand is last week and through this whole program, it's called Water, Water Everywhere. And most of you are thinking of stormwater. You're thinking of it raining from the sky and you see the water on the streets. To truly understand what watersheds are, you must be aware of the fact that it's much more than stormwater. As we get into this further down, I want you, when you leave today, to understand the whole compass of what's involved in a watershed. It's not just stormwater. It's sanitary sewer water. It's flood control projects. When I look at a watershed, it's all encompassed. And many of you are members of environmental groups in different places and here locally, and the tendency tends to be when I work with environmental groups is the runoff, the water, the flooding. And I have to teach them to think about the whole big picture. In Upper St. Clair, whether you realize it or not, we have 156 miles of sanitary sewers. That's a lot of sewers to maintain. We also have 4,780 manholes. Who knows what a manhole is? Anybody ever seen a manhole out in the street? Now, Mom, close your ears, but I've been going in sanitary manholes since I was 5 or 6. Nowadays, they would never even think of doing that. But there's manholes that are openings to the sewers, whether they're storm or sanitary. Reason for those are access to clean them out. Some of them are for venting, but you need those manholes to get down into the structures. And we have 4,780 of those to maintain. So now you're getting really confused because you're thinking about a watershed and the water draining down, and you're worried about the soil and erosion and talking about what to place in a watershed and pollution. Well, I also have the underground to worry about, where all this water goes. Now, my title of my speech is Watershed in Your Wallet. So the definition I have of a wallet is where most of you store all your money every day. Is that, would you agree? So if you actually combine the two, watershed and a wallet, basically it's the entire region of money that all flows to one body of water, whether natural or artificial. And that's what I have to work with to make this balance in this whole community. I talked about the watershed, and I really want you to start thinking about the multifacets of a watershed. First of all, you know that there's storm sewers. That's probably the easiest from what you talked about. And I think you went outside last week, and did you work on watersheds? You didn't do that? You didn't go outside. Today is a beautiful day, and I have you stuffed in this room. I thought about taking you on a field trip and looking at manholes and getting involved. I'd make Skip go down the manhole. I wouldn't make anybody else. But I thought that'd push you over the edge. Maybe another class, another day, I'll take you on a field trip, and I'll teach you what, in the field, what we have to deal with and how they deteriorate and where they're located and the problems I have. That could be another idea. Boots, jeans, and an open mind if you're going out in the field with me. The storm sewers are what you all know. You drive down the road, you see a storm inlet on the side of the road. When it rains, you see hopefully the water goes to that storm inlet. One of the problems is during a storm, it could be windy. Trees, branches, dirt flow down onto the road, and a lot of times they clog those inlets. Then the water bypasses an inlet, and that's when flooding may start. Because the reason for storm inlets with those grates along the road is because I can have the biggest pipes in the world underneath the road, but if I can't get the water into them, they're useless. This big culvert you have over here, that collects the water all the way from South Hills Village. Up there with all those storm inlets in that parking lot, starts to flow down. We got Westminster, all of 19 all coming down, and there are many times you see that just barreling out of there. Good and bad points. The good point is I've captured the water so it's not flooding someone else. The bad point is because of the velocity and the volume, it's destroying my stream. But we're working on a few side projects I'll mention that's helping that to balance it out. Sanitary sewers. Who knows what a sanitary sewer is? Very good, very good. A sanitary sewer is a sewer that's built. It starts at your house with what we call a sewer lateral. There's a smaller pipe about 4 inches that comes out of every single home or building. That lateral then connects to what we call a main line, 8 inches and above. Those main lines keep building and building in size until eventually they get to a much larger sewer that ties into Alcosan. Alcosan is our treatment facility. It's a wonderful place to visit. In fact, my parents used to go there on dates. My dad would take my poor mother down there. Alcosan wanted to use the PR thing that my dad took her on one of their first dates down to Alcosan. They still were married for almost 50 years. But it's down along the river, and I would highly recommend, as a side little issue, I'm very involved with Alcosan trying to help them on committees, and they offer tours 2 or 3 times a year. Free tours that come down. I know you think, oh my God, why would I go down to a treatment plant? But I think it would be wise to go visit it to see how clean it is, how it operates, and basically this is where all the water ends up. And it's the center of all this controversy that's going on with sanitary sewers. So I'll be happy to pass on to Tracy or anything next time one of the open houses comes. It's free to anybody. I've actually had some of my communities, like my Mount Olivers and Whitehall, we get a bus and we bus all of council down because we pay hundreds of thousands of dollars to Alcosan every year to treat our sewage, and no one's ever been there. But those sanitary sewers, and we have maps here, and this is a map of all the sanitary sewers in the entire township. The little circles are all the manholes that we have to deal with. Traditionally, you put a manhole in every 200 to 400 feet, or where something would turn for hydraulics. So that's why there's so many manholes. Now, our system in Upper St. Clair is a separate system. What does that mean? We have storm sewers to collect all the storm water, and we have sanitary sewers to collect the sanitary sewage. We actually require in our ordinances, when new developments and homes have gone in since the 70s, that a separate storm sewer be constructed for every home. Why? Because people get a little worked up. They only focus on their own little house, and if their neighbor, when it rains, rain spouts and driveway are flooding them out, it's a little bit of a problem. You cannot increase the water that runs off a piece of property after development than what was there in the volume-wise than before development. What that means, if I live next door to you and I built a house and I have so much roof and driveway, when it rains, obviously the water flows off quicker because it's in what we call an impervious surface. It won't go into the ground. I am responsible for piping that into a storm sewer that's provided by the developer so it doesn't affect you. So I've solved a problem of not flooding my neighbor. And this requirement of no additional runoff post-development, as we call it pre-development, is from the Clean Stream Law that was enacted in 1976. Great, I've solved that. But I'm out of it, you're out of it. But guess where that water's going? It's going down those storm sewers, getting bigger, storm sewers bigger, till it heads to this big culvert like we have over here. And during a rain, don't get in front of that. It's very, very tough. So we have a separate storm sewer system. But in Allegheny County, in this big watershed, now you're used to McLaughlin, Painters, Brush Run, and Chartiers. But we are part of a bigger world. And as we flow down into other watersheds, we eventually are in the huge watershed of the river basins that go down to the treatment facility. Some people in the older communities don't have separate sewer systems. They have combined sewer systems. And you could say, why was that ever done? Well, in a combined sewer system, and what you have to remember is that it was only since the 50s that we have sanitary sewers. People don't understand that. In the early 50s in this area, there were still a lot outhouses everywhere. Alcosan was only created in the 50s. That's not that long ago. When everyone thinks we're this high-tech evolved world, you know, in third world countries don't have sewers. Well, that wasn't that long ago. So they were so happy to get sewers that they built combined sewers. Storm and sanitary were in the same pipe. And those pipes then went out, and they had a combined system, and then they go to the river. Part of it went down to the treatment facility, and they had overflows because it was stormwater went directly into the river. We have 300, I think, and 80-some overflows along our rivers in the city, around the city of Pittsburgh. And you could say, how could that have happened? And that's terrible. But think about it. They didn't even have sewage systems. They were so happy to get sewers. That was a wonderful thing at that time. And the engineer, Mr. Boone, who devised it, we have deep tunnels along the rivers that are unbelievable that Chicago's now building, trying to you know, copy us. It was a great thing. But times change and you learn a little bit. And the city of Pittsburgh has a major combined sewer system, but they also are the largest area that has separate sewers. They have 200, I think, and 54 miles of separate sanitary sewers. And people forget that. They think the city's just combined and they're causing all the trouble. They have major work to do on both systems. So that's sanitary sewers. And I talked about combined sewers, and it's not a bad thing, but it's not a good thing. We started out as a very good thing, as I explained, but now with the issue of how large the area has grown and the amount of water that goes in there, we do have some issues that we're trying to work to clean that up. But what we must remember is when it was built, it was permitted to be built, they have a permit, and that was a design. So I always tell all my groups that get very concerned about the environment and want to go full steam ahead, there's a balance to everything you do in life. How'd you like that, Mom? You always tell me that. A balance to everything you do in life. We all want to have homes. We all want to drive cars. We all want to have this nice living that we have. And in order to do that, there's systems that support that. People own property. They have the right to develop it. If you're upset about what they're going to do in the development, quite frankly, I tell people, then buy the property. A prime example, I say, is what I call Wingfield Pines, because I've been here my entire life. I forgot to mention that. I'm a lifelong resident. I used to go down to Wingfield Pines, and I was there when it was a really nice recreation, and it got down to what it was today. But the Allegheny Land Trust were able to put together grants and donations, which was terrific, because they were concerned about how it was going to be. Pardon me? Yes. Yes, the Citizens for Land Stewardship helped them, which I'm a member of, I should say. But it's the perfect example. I tell people, if you don't like what's going to be developed to you or you're concerned about it, then put together something and buy it. You cannot crucify the landowner because by right, they own it and they can develop it. And if it fits into what we call zoning, the entire township, I should have brought you out a zoning map, is zoned for different districts. Residential homes, commercial, industrial. By law, we must provide for every type of facility that can be built, from a residential home all the way down, I hate to say it, to adult bookstores, because people will sue us and they will win because they have a right to develop. So each municipality must have a certain amount of area. Now, if that area builds out and is no longer available, the township has met their requirements. So as long as it fits within a zoning and a developer wants to do it, they have a right to do that. So how do you balance that? How do you keep going? And that's something I always tell people to watch for and look for. Don't tell me you're unhappy. Don't tell you they're polluting. Let's work together. I just want to give Tracy a compliment where I met her a long time ago, and she asked me a question after one of the board meetings. How can I get the Board of Commissioners to understand about how we want to work together? And I suggested to her, come talk, give reports, show what we want to do together as a team. You know, I see so many municipal meetings that people come up, and you know what? They have a really good idea. But they come in with that fire in their eyes, and this is the way it has to be, and you're doing the wrong thing, and they give them no options on how to work together. The boards of municipalities have a lot to balance, and they have a lot of residents to balance. But if you come forward like Tracy has done, where she has suggested ideas, helped get grants, there's tremendous things going on here because we try and work together. We don't always make the right decisions. They don't always agree with our viewpoint, but we're moving forward better than most communities I know because of that. And I'd like to compliment you for that. You always stay so calm at the mic. So, very, very good. So I taught you about that we now have combined sewers, storm sewers, and sanitary sewers. And the reason I'm trying to teach you is what comes out of your wallet is paying for all of that. Remember, this is the watershed in your wallet day. I'm the one that spends all this money trying to balance it so we can have, when we get down to point X, down here in Chartiers Creek, where all of this, including McLaughlin and Painters, work up here, that's point X. And the goal is that we have a watershed and a stream that we're trying to clean up, although in a lot of places it's much better than it ever did, and at the same time be able to have some recreation facilities, but then all of you can live upstream and live in the manner that you like without balance. I'm going to repeat that continually here today, is I want you to do that. So how do we pay for SOARs? Well, every place that you live right now, in your house, South Hills Village, which I'll put another plug in, my father built that originally, and the Gafilans, to their credit, had years put on that land. They owned all the land. They owned from South Hills Village all the way through St. Clair Country Club. They owned here, everywhere. They donated a lot of land. They also put restrictions. Across the street from South Hills Village, where it's now residential development, that could not be developed, I think it was like for 25 or 30 years till after South Hills Village. They were so far ahead in their thinking of conservation and working. You know, they donated to a church, which you know is going to not really develop the land, you know, overly. They did a country club. They did here. And then they knew that land would go eventually, but they made a time constraint on it. When South Hills Village was developed, there was all kinds of restrictions. And now Gafillan Farm is the same way. So it's really kind of neat that we were very blessed to have people that years ago had that kind of forethought to go ahead and do that. And they certainly took care of the township, let me tell you, with what they did. However, there's other people who have developed. All these developments around here, they're residential homes, and all the roads were built by developers coming in, owning a piece of property, building a road, providing a place for the next road to connect to, and building houses on it. They were required to put in storm sewers and sanitary. I will tell you, originally storm sewers weren't even put in. And today I do a wide gamut of municipal engineering. I have the inner city, and then I also represent Swickley Heights. We don't have storm sewers in the Heights. We do, well, we do, but we do a lot of grass swales, we use ponds, but they have a 5-acre minimum. So a 5-acre minimum lot allows you the luxury of doing a lot more creativity when it comes to stormwater. That doesn't really happen everywhere. Upper St. Clair's minimum is 13,500 square feet. You don't think I have to check that every day, do you? And it's a nice sized lot, but it's smaller. So we couldn't do the swales. The swales weren't working. The water was getting collected and flooding up people down below. So we're going to pipe it. We're going to put it underground in those storm sewers. Storm sewers are larger than sanitary. I try and teach people that a average size sanitary sewer on a normal slope, where the slope is how it grades down this and flows downhill, can take 400 homes, sanitary sewage. Because all it's supposed to take is your dishwashing, your toilets, your showers. A storm sewer, it only takes 14 driveways to flood that same sanitary sewer. That's why we want to keep them separate. But a developer has to put in the storm sewers now. Then along came storm sewers. They have to construct them for every home. They have to have them so that your rain spouts can tie in and your driveway drains. They have to take all the water from the road. Now you have the separate sanitary that you have your laterals connecting to. It is a major no-no to have your storm sewers, your rain spouts and driveway into my sanitary. Because what did I just teach you? An 8-inch sanitary can handle 400 homes. 14 driveways are going to flood out that sanitary. And where do you think that sanitary sewage goes when it overflows? It goes in people's basements and overflows in the road. And you haven't lived till you've been in someone's basement with 5 foot of sewage. And now their furnace is gone, their washer is gone. I'll never forget a story. I was with my dad on Provost Road in Whitehall on Christmas Eve. The water's rising so fast, everybody, you can imagine these people, you know, imagine how you would feel if you're looking at half your house going. It's coming up to the first floor. Here comes the borough engineer. You're ready to about kill him because he's the only one who will show up. And he turns to you and he says, "You have a sledgehammer." And you look at him like he is out of his mind. And he says, "What do you want a sledgehammer for?" And I remember my dad saying, "Because the only way we're going to save your first floor is if you help me dig a hole in your foundation, because otherwise it's going to go." It's horrible. And I've told this everywhere from Executive Roddy to Al Cassan to anybody who would listen. I am tired of growing up and being second generation with people getting flooded. It just can't happen anymore. So we have to work on that with sanitary sewers. So it's a no-no to have rain spouts and driveway drains in my sanitary sewer. Remember that. It's also the law. Well, that's because, let's be honest, you don't know who gets called in the middle of the night. You just have to ask my husband and my mother who they call. They don't call the board. They call the township engineer or the borough engineer, and we're the ones out there in the middle of the night with the public works. So yes, I get very protective about them. So public money and federal grants build these sewers in your development. Then when they're built, they get turned over to the municipalities. Why? Because it's a public health issue. You as individual property owners are not going to be able to take care of those sewers that are built in your streets. The municipalities will, and the counties will, because it's a bigger picture. So we then have to handle them by user fees. Oh boy, here we go. That sanitary sewer bill you're getting is going to go up. You are not going to be happy. I'm going to attempt here to explain to you how we calculate it. So now I know when you get your next sewer bill, you're all going to be there calculating, checking, and you're going to call the township if there's one error. A user fee is similar to your electric bill, except it's in reverse. Electricity is generated at different power plants along the rivers, and they send it to you. Then you pay for what you use. Well, let's think about sewers a little bit in reverse. You're generating the sanitary sewage, and you're sending it to the treatment plant. So it is truthfully a user fee. And how they base it on is water usage. Now, most municipalities base it on water consumption. The average home uses about 12,500 to 14,500 gallons per month. That's what I tell people. And some can be less depending on the people how many people live in the house. There's definitely the teenage factor, depending on the number of showers and wash. I mean, I'm not joking. I mean, it all enters into it. If you're a single person living in a house, your water usage should be lower. You know, you may not do as much laundry. A lot of municipalities, what they do is they take that water usage and they charge you per 1,000 gallons, an extra amount over the 1,000 gallons you use. Upper St. Clair does it a little bit different. What we do here is we call it an adjustment factor. And if you turn to page 7, I'll try and go through that a little bit. Again, we have you all as the customer, okay? You submit your water usage bills. They're done for you, actually, because we can't rely on people submitting their bills. Some of them would probably not do that. Goes to the water company. The water company submits its pages and pages. Now we do it electronically. It used to be, registers I would go through to try and make sure everything was fair. But every single home in Allegheny County and in Upper St. Clair, let's say, has their water records is sent from the water company to Alcosan. Alcosan then takes all this and they register it. They have a treatment facility fee that they add to it, and they do it per 1,000 gallons, and they send that out to all the municipalities. In this case, it's Upper St. Clair. Upper St. Clair then looks at its operating costs, and I'm going to get into just very shortly what all those operating costs are. And they determine how much it costs them on a monthly basis to work on all these sewers I talked about. So then we do what's called an adjustment factor. It's the multiplier that's necessary to cover all our costs. So to give you an example so it's a little easier to understand, let's say you use 1,000 gallons, okay? That 1,000 gallons gets submitted to the water company knows that because you have water lines that go to your house. Also, when a developer builds your subdivision, he has to put in the water lines, the electric lines, the sanitary sewer, the storm sewer, the telephone, and now, of course, the cable. That all goes into development. That's why you don't see that many developers anymore. It's not cheap to develop. If everyone could do it and it was easy, we'd all be developers, but it's not easy today. That goes to Alcosan, and Alcosan charges $2 per 1,000 gallons. I made this easy. They actually charge $2.34. I was trying to keep it even, so when you get your bill, it says $2.34. That's why. I was trying to keep it rounded off. So Upper St. Clair, upstairs in the tax office, I'm sure we all know where the tax office is. I visit it often. They get a bill for $2 for you. Okay, I got a bill for $2. They go through the cost of the last month and see what they've had to spend on all these sewers, and they've had to spend $1.34. And so the total bill per month for you is $3.34. They take $3.34 divided by what Alcosan charges, and the adjustment factor is called 1.67, and that's where that comes from. A lot of people are it's kind of not confusing, but they're not used to it. St. Clair has found that they really like to monitor their costs on a monthly basis, which is kind of good. A lot of my municipalities just do the per 1,000 gallons. It's automatic, and they forget about it, so they're not really looking at what they've spent till the end of the year. So I create budgets in every one of my communities for them, almost to nauseam. Skip can tell you at the municipal meetings. I normally give an engineer's report in other communities, and they get tired of me talking about budgets, money, and sewers. But Upper St. Clair has such a professional staff. Whether you like what they do or not, they have really good people who calculate this and keep track of this constantly. So they actually do it for me. But we have an adjustment factor. So when you get that sewer bill, you know, it's going to be based on your water usage, but it's based on the cost of the municipality. So you're going to say, well, okay, I can appreciate that. What are operating costs? What do we have to do? Well, first of all, there's sewer repairs. And how do we come up with those sewer repairs? Well, this map right here shows the televised sanitary sewers and inspected manholes totally across the municipality. And what I've done is in red, these are the sewers that have been televised since 1991. And they're all over the township. Sometimes we have a rule, I have a rule when the new road program, you know how you hear the township has an annual road program? Before any roads are repaired, resurfaced, because it really irritates me when a new road is done and a utility company comes in and digs it up. Heaven forbid if it's a municipality. So every sanitary sewer is TV. They actually put a TV camera underground and we can visually see what's going on with that sewer. That used to be my job, 8 hours a day looking at sanitary sewers, and my dad couldn't wait to tell me when it was in color. Now I can look at them in color all day. But it's the way that you look at how to fix the sewers. Every road is TV'd before it's resurfaced, and we fix it. So some of these are because of road programs, some of them are because of backups or problems, and that's how they're selected. This right here in the green, we are on a major program this year. Many of you have heard about the consent order that EPA is going to put on every municipality, and Upper St. Clair is already starting. We're not waiting for them to sign and to force us to do something. We're already in action, and one of the things we'll be doing this year, we'll be TVing the entire trunk sewer along McLaughlin. Why would we want to do that? Well, that's the main part where everything flows. It also happens flowing next to the creek. So I get two things. I get to see if the sanitary sewer actually structurally needs to be repaired, and I can also see if I have a problem with what I call exfiltration, you know, water going out of the sanitary into the stream. Keep in mind, watershed, we have to balance the stormwater and the sanitary. So it's going to be a really great project. Very difficult. You can't imagine the flow that's in this pipe. And it's going to have to be done in the middle of the night, and I have to pump from one manhole to another because I don't want that sanitary sewage running on the ground or in the stream. So I have to have massive pumps to keep it pumping because I don't think you'd be too happy if I shut off your toilets for a couple days while I'm TVing. People tend not to like that. So I have to keep it flowing. It's going to be a nighttime job. It's not going to be cheap, but it has to be done. That way we start at the bottom. Because if I started to fix all these sewers up in here and my main trunk sewer was bad shape, it doesn't make sense. As I explained to my board, you start at the bottom and you work your way up. Another project that we're doing is, I'm a real team person, and fortunately my communities have always agreed with that. One thing you have to realize is that there's multiple work that goes on between communities. Remember, we're Upper St. Clair, but we flow down into Bridgeville. That then flows along into the Alcosan sewer. So this is actually the borough of Bridgeville. Why would we care about that? Well, this trunk sewer, it starts actually up here in Bethel Park, goes down through, and there's the green line. Then it continues on the yellow line. We all share that. It was built, I think, I want to say, early 50s, 40s, and there's a sewer agreement that all three communities have to pay to maintain this sewer right here in Bridgeville. We have to maintain our own sewer up here in St. Clair. Bethel has to maintain theirs, but Bethel, Upper St. Clair, and Bridgeville have to maintain this. We have a grant. I'm real involved with a group called Three Rivers Wet Weather Demonstration Program. I've been with them since the beginning on committees. I'm on every committee known to man, from stormwater to sanitary. They did demonstration projects where if you could go out and show something that was going to be unique, you could get a grant. Well, we've gotten a grant for about $100,000 to help us, first of all, map this. You know, it sounds silly, but this sewer was built so long ago, people have moved dirt around it. It's been, you know, flooded over. We need to have a good set of plans to know what's going on with it. Then we're TVing it. We have been TVing it just recently. It's been really tough because of the weather, plus the amount of flow in it. Keep in mind, you think St. Clair's bad. When you get down here, now we have Bethel, St. Clair, and Bridgeville in the same pipe. And my crews have been out. We have a real good set of maps, and we have the TVing. The whole idea of the project we're doing jointly with Bethel Park and Bridgeville is simply to do a report of what has to be fixed on this sewer. And in Bridgeville along Baldwin Street, there were many, many people who got flooded out terribly for years. So Years ago, there was a parallel sewer built in to try and separate that. So much time has passed that Gateway is the only one that has any history. Fortunately, we're also the engineers for Bridgeville. The report is find those people, get them out of the system, that this would only be a trunk sewer. You can't, there's so much flow, it's hard to control it. If you have a couple houses that always get flooded, it just makes sense to reroute them some other way. So we don't have to worry about them getting flooded. We have enough problems with worrying about the creek, the stream, and the sewer that I have to lose sleep about. Skip will tell you, every time it rains, I wake up and I have a whole list of people in my head that I know are getting flooded. I don't want to do that down here anymore, and we have a great opportunity. And the three communities have been working hand in hand. Bethel's taken the lead, and we've worked through that. So keep in mind, I told you about all these sewers up here we have to maintain. Well, we have trunk sewers we have to maintain. Plus, when St. Clair developed over here, this trunk sewer that is in South Fayette all the way down, we own that solely. The one that goes by Mayview, that's totally Upper St. Clair. South Fayette has their own parallel sewer system, which is nice because when we have to work on our systems, we help each other out. Everybody talked about that pumping from one manhole to the other. It's tough. Well, when we work down there, we can pump over to South Fayette temporarily, and they can pump back to ours if we're working on the sewers. It really helps, and we work very well with them. You'll find as you go through this process, engineers, municipality always seem to work things out at our level. And same thing with public works, and a lot of good things get done because we look at the big picture. But I'm trying to tell you there's lots of costs there. Plus, future upgrade. Now, when we went over in Painter's Run, or actually throughout the township, besides the work, in the future, we had to create maps. And maybe I'll go over here on the corrective action work to show the work we've done so far and what future is. On this map here, what I've created with tons of colors. I even have magenta. All the guys hate magenta. Yes, sir. Strictly sanitary for the moment. I'll get to the storm sewer in a minute. Sanitary, I have all the work that's been done over the years. These are lines that have completely been replaced. And after the class, if you want to come up here, I actually have charts that show you by watershed the exact footage and what we've done. But this has to continue. And one of the things that we had to do was create sanitary sewer maps. And let this fit in here. St. Clair has one of the best geographic information systems around. What is that? That's the maps that shows where everything is in the field, both sanitary and storm. We have, years ago, they were way ahead of the game where they flew the township and got an aerial, which they call the topography of the land. Then we added layers of all the homes. All these red things are where all you live. We actually update these whenever there's building permits for decks and porches. So when people look at our maps and say their house isn't quite right, that's great. Tell me what's changed on it, because there's a lot of homes. We have the streets, the schools, we show the parks, we have our sanitary sewers, we have sizes of the sewers, we have elevations, and I need all this to do my job. You can't just go out and just start fixing storm and sanitary sewers if you don't know what's in the ground. But this was a great expense, and this is a continued future upgrade. A lot of times we have to check what's happening because sewers were built, maybe they weren't built in the same place that the maps were shown. So, we also have to do what we call in different watersheds for future, we have to study them. In Painter's Run watershed, Painter's Run is up here, we are working with Mount Lebanon, Bethel Park, Scott Township, and Upper St. Clair because we all flow into that watershed. We all flow down to the same creek. And I got them all together, and they agreed to do a study of Painter's Run to find out what's going on with the sanitary source. We went out and did what we call flow isolation studies. Well, what is that? If any of you, does anybody live over in Painter's Run by Walt's Tavern over that area? Well, in the middle of the night, there are these guys running all around. I'm surprised I didn't have more calls to the police department. And you go out in the middle of the night and you put weirs or structures, little plates inside the sanitary sewers to measure how much water's coming through. Because at 3 o'clock in the morning, there shouldn't be a lot of sanitary sewage, wouldn't you agree? Because people are sleeping. Most people aren't doing their wash. Most people aren't taking showers or flushing their toilets or whatever at that time of night. So we can calculate out by the number of homes how much sewage should be in that pipe. It's interesting, the same technology that was used to do that almost 80 years ago in civil engineering is exactly the same. It's one of the few technologies that hasn't changed. because the flow that comes out of a house really hasn't changed in the size of sewer. Everything else technology-wise in storm sewers has really changed, but not that. So we can tell where our bad sewers are. So we did flow isolation studies. We also went out and needed to do our storm sewer mapping, which we're working on right now. We're on a 5-year program to map our storm sewers in the township. And that's Skip's job over there. And he and another gentleman are going out with a GPS system with the satellites and finding all my storm sewers for me. We went out and dye test. Remember I told you no on storm drain spouts and driveway drains into our sanitary sewers? We have to go out and dye test every single home. You put dye in the rain spout or the driveway drain. You do different colors because we want to keep moving, and you stand at the sanitary sewer manholes and you see if the dye comes through. If the dye comes through, you have a problem, and you have to get out of my sewer system. We did all that in Painter's Run. We're trying to put together a system and a plan to show what work we have to do. Why? Well, the estimate is $3 billion to fix just the sanitary sewer problem in Allegheny County going down to Alkestan. $3 billion. This report came out from Alkestan called the Long Range Control Plan. And I was asked, I was on a team of 5 municipal engineers to review this report to come back and say, it was so funny. Arletta Williams is the director of Alkestan. Our first meeting was, they spent, I don't know, hundreds of thousands of dollars, $600,000 or something, preparing this report. We're all volunteers, and she says, can you look at this for like 3 months and tell us how to save money? 3 months to save money. I wasn't the guy who's paid to do this, but what we found out and what we discussed with them was they assumed the worst case that municipalities wouldn't do all this work I'm talking about sanitary sewers. So they assumed the worst case that there's tons of infiltration in the system and the combined sewers that flow from the creeks and the streams, and they had to take it down the treatment plant. What we need to do, and with the consent order, which is coming from the Environmental Protection Agency, that all municipalities will be required to sign. So I tell my board, sign or go to jail. And I don't mean to be funny about that. I mean, that's what it's going to get down to. And I was on another committee that worked to rewrite it to make it more reasonable for municipalities and the EPA to try and get those costs down. Because the majority of that $3 billion is from municipalities, but the bottom line is, guess who's paying for that? Guess whose wallet that's coming out of? Both sides. You want to pay for Alkestan's bill to upgrade the treatment side out of your right side of your wallet, and out of your left side you're going to pay for your municipality. So it only behooves us all to try and work together to lower these costs. That's why I'm a big team partnering person. I'm a big look at the big picture. So I've got you thinking about $3 billion on sanitaries, and you're getting probably ill at this point. And now I'm going to even add to it. Let's talk about storm sewers. And if you look on page 9, I have a little diagram that I always bring along that shows you about water budgets and storm sewers. And this is a really good chart that starts to show you, it's on page 9 of the handout, where if you look at it, and I think many of you may have seen some of these cycle charts when you were back in high school. I know that I like to forget some of my high school days, but this was a really good chart, and it shows the rain up on the right-hand side where it's raining down. Lots of things happen with this rain, okay, if you look at this chart. Some of it you can see goes directly down to a stream, and it goes away. Some of it goes into the ground and recharges, because a lot of people, when we want that, have wells. A lot of people survive on wells. And I guess I'll fess up now. I live on Johnson Road, and we put a well in. And all my neighbors are all worked up. Why is the township engineer? What does she know that we don't know? And what did we hit water initially 30 feet, and then we went down? Well, I got to tell you, my husband's Mr. Gardner. And guess what the sewage bills are based on? Water usage. And we have a swimming pool. And holy cow, it's like unbelievable. So we dug a well, and because I costed it out over how long it would take, so he can grow anything he wants now and water to death. And we can have we have to work on the pool a little bit with the filter system. But I envision a lot of people looking into that in the future as the sewers go. It's not really good for your potable drinking water unless you want to put in some filter systems. And not so much because it's been polluted by, every day things. It's just we have a lot of old mines and environmental things here. But we do have a well, and that the groundwater has to recharge that. If you look at here, there's some reservoir storage. Water comes from the sky and it goes into those a lot of places that you use to help run electric plants. There's a lot of uses for water that people don't understand. We take the water out of the rivers, and you look at a little house here, municipal use. That's for you. So you have water you know, to live on. You know, industrials need it, agricultural needs it quite a bit. So all this water coming from the sky is what we all live on in various ways. Now that has its good and its bad points. When you look at this, I guess, you know, I think about it when I give these talks. I'm on way too many committees. I'm on a committee that Mr. Roddy put together and through Carnegie Mellon President Jared Cohen, looking at the region. And you may think of the soil and erosion runoff problems and the sanitary runoff problems and development, but we're looking at 3 counties, and where it starts in the top, believe it or not, is the agricultural problems. You have a farm, you have farm animals. The runoff from the pastures is polluted, greatly polluted from the animals. And you wouldn't think about that because you think, oh, they're the healthiest people around, but that's where it starts. You start up in the agricultural, you get down to the rivers that has the industrial along the rivers, and they have discharges. Then you get all us in the mix with development from where we live, and boy, you stand down there at the point, and you wonder sometimes. It has greatly improved. I have actually water skied down along the point, but we have work to do. And that's something, you know, we're on a good path, but we have a lot of work to do. But don't just think it's our local community here. This is a big region, a big watershed that goes on. So this is your stormwater budget and how you have water flowing, that some of it's free and natural, some people use it. It's a really good picture to look at, is how water affects all of us, down to the aquifers and everything that goes on. Very important. In fact, Pittsburgh is going to become, I feel, one of the places in the future, God willing, that everything goes okay for this world, people are going to want to live, because what do we have lots of? Water. You look out west and what's going on, they don't have water. They're building massive pipes to try and pipe in water into the Las Vegas area and different places. They don't have enough water. We have plenty of water, and I tell people that's great. We have to take care of that water. And, you know, and it's a balancing act, because we have to take care of it, but we all still want to live, and we have lots of businesses and people and issues and farms, so we have to do it wisely and look at everything. And I know I talk a lot about the sanitary side, because I want you to realize that's a major part of this too. It's all interrelated. It's not just the stormwater. But development and storm sewers, let's talk about that. Developers, as I told you, install the storm sewer pipes. Every home has to be connected to a storm sewer in this municipality. And we are very good about that. And we are probably one of the better municipalities that have that. You know, years ago, I did land development in private. I used to work for those dreaded developers, that's what I call them. They're also my clients now. Gateway, as Tracy said, we do surveying, mapping, land development. We're the old-fashioned true civil engineers. We've stuck true to that. We didn't really get into the other issues. And if you ask, I'll tell you, why is it called civil engineering? Well, years ago, there were 2 types of engineers. I talk to kids a lot. Military and civilian. And that's where civil engineering started. You were either in the military or you were a civilian. And civil engineering is the mother of all engineering. I tell all these fancy electrical and chemicals. But anyways, years ago, I came in, and when developers built before, remember how I told you there were just swales? There were no storm sewers. Then we had to build storm sewers, and all the developers would complain. The cost of putting in those storm sewers was unbelievable. They had to add to their development costs. Okay, they put them in, they got over it, but they would just discharge them to the streams. In the 1976, when the Clean Stream Law Act came about, and you cannot put additional water down on your neighbor, we had to do stormwater management. I did the first stormwater management pond in the office, and you thought they were going to drive me out. Because here I am, this hotshot college, you know, daughter of Fred, and I'm telling these guys, we've got to put these ponds in, it's a law. But no, and they said, fine. Well, they never taught it in school. There's no books, no nothing except, you know, theories and stuff that we had to learn from different people to create how to do this. Even today, in engineering curriculum, there isn't a lot unless you specialize in hydrology in the basic engineering that teaches it, and that's always a pet peeve of mine. So I did this stormwater pond. Okay, people accepted that. Municipalities started having it in their ordinances, and now we have ponds. I have maps of municipalities of all these stormwater ponds. In fact, I have one in St. Clair. And it was a great idea. However, you know, we are evolving and learning. Engineering is like any other profession. Every day something changes and you have to think ahead. And people got used to that stormwater management. They think that's the way to do it. Well, now I have 15 ponds in the whole township as an example. Who maintains them? We do. Unless it's in a private development. What do I mean by that? They call it planned residential development. That word that some people think is a bad word, some people think it's a good. But if it's in a private development where there's a homeowners association, they maintain their own stormwater ponds. They do not maintain their roads because it takes public water. So we have to rely on them to go out every 6 months or a year to inspect these and make sure they work. I took the road crew, I'm famous for my bus trips years ago, and some of the staff here on a bus trip, and I did in St. Clair and Peters and whatever. We walked out to the ponds and the tanks. And I taught them, I said, the grass has to be cut, you have to get the weeds out, we can't let it fill up with muck because it won't work. You know, we have to keep that flowing. Another method of stormwater management is not just a pond, it's an underground tank, an oversized storm sewer pipe. Because think about it, South Hills Village has no land, nor does the developer want to give up that precious land to build a nice pond. A great example of a stormwater pond that really is unique is go out 19 to Beiheimer's Funeral Home and look at their front yard. That is a stormwater management pond. They can cut the grass, if you notice, and you would never guess it, but that is for stormwater off their lot. They used the requirements. They did not want to put a tank in. We're also the engineers for Peters, because they don't want to maintain it, and so they put in this pond in their front yard. They've been working on, there's this nice little sculpture that flows out. You would never know it. I have lots of places like that have done that, but you've got to convince and that's precious land, okay? You have to get the developer, and the way it works in ordinances today in municipalities is we don't require you specifically, you must put in a tank or you must put in a pond. We're getting to that point, but it's stormwater management. We give you examples of how to do it. A tank is a big size, oversized storm sewer pipe. There's a lot of banks in that have them underground. A lot of the sites you see that are new, they're buried. They're huge. Some of the original ones, if you go up Hayes Road and you turn into where, I don't know, I guess I'm telling my age here, St. Clair Beach. Anybody remember St. Clair Beach? Okay, well that's been developed over there, and one of the original stormwater things was a concrete tank underground. It's buried in one of the first lots as you turn into development. It was a great idea at the time, but you know, I have to admit, I explained to people later, we're out there with the road crew, you got to think about this poor guy. This tank is only 5.5 feet high. I get something like Skip size, okay? Or you, Mr. Fussell, who's going to clean out this tank. Poor guy's in there. There's no light. There's no daylight. It's dark. Okay, you got to hunch over. The thing is probably 150 feet by 100, so you got to get back in the corner. There's baffles in it. There's creatures in there. I mean, it's difficult. It's really difficult to clean out. And you could say, well, so what? That's a guy's job. Well, you know, you got to plan. I would rather have him have an easier time cleaning out something to go work on another project than spend all day there. So that was one of the original things. We have tanks and we have ponds. The theory now, we've been thinking a lot, is regional ponds are the way to go. But municipalities like St. Clair have already built up so much, it's hard to come up with a regional pond. Places that are developing, like we have Peters Township, I also represent Jefferson Hills. What is that? I go to the bottom of one of these watersheds and I find land that can become a regional pond that we can build. Every developer that comes along, then I require him to, instead of what it would cost to have done his stormwater management, he puts that in an escrow account that's used to maintain and build that regional pond. Peters Township is looking at that very seriously. We did a whole study of the township because they have the land to do it. Unfortunately here, we're already built up and we're still on that individual stormwater phase. So now, years ago, I pushed them with the ponds to do it, and now we're talking about regional ponds. And now we're even talking about some more innovative ideas for stormwater. And it's hard for people to fathom that. Most of the ponds are designed to be dry ponds. A lot of them you don't solder. The people bought the lots, they got them for a reduced rate because there was a channel in the back, and they don't like the channel in the back, so now they want to pipe it, and they want the municipality to pipe it. Well, it was originally put in as a channel, and it should remain that way. If the people want to do that, I will review it, and if it's okay, we'll accept it, but we shouldn't have, the taxpayers shouldn't have to pay for that. Because I always try and explain to people, and they can get very mad, why should we pay to have something that you enjoy? You know, the rest of the taxpayers aren't. I think it's $50,000 or more to fix it. You can see I got $3 billion ticket over here. I'm not going to spend, you know, $50,000 on making you be able to have a play station in the back. And that was one of the original stormwaters right up the street from me. And it was a very controversial issue, and I think we did the right thing there. We have to protect the taxpayers as a whole. So with these ponds out there, we have a lot of tanks. South Hills Village is going to be completely upgrading and changing and all kinds of different things going on, and hopefully we'll have an opportunity in working with them to do something with stormwater. I'm always looking for developers to help. And I'll be honest with you, most of them are willing to work with us. We have a developer down on, everybody puts St. Clair in their names anymore. There's a Clairvoyance office park that's going through down on Boyce Road and down the street from where I live that they want to put a bank in there and some offices on the land across from, I guess it's Summerfield Commons. It's been there a long time. And then there's, that's Clairvoyance, and it's St. Clair Point. I always tell people quit using the same name. But this is a carriage home development, very nice carriage homes. I don't want to, the price is pretty high up there. And developers are willing and open to talk about things. This developer has met our ordinances, but he has met with us, and he's trying. He's going to use wetlands, which gets into my next slide, on trying to control the stormwater. He also is very willing to work with me on some innovative inlet ideas. He'll put them in if I can find someone to maintain them. Because practices are changing. Remember I told you about how I almost got run out of the office when I wanted to put in stormwater ponds? Well, now we're getting to the point where we're starting to think about rain barrels and cisterns and groundwater recharge and inlet filters and using wetlands to try with the stormwater. Because I'm battling the sanitary sores over here, trying to fix them and keep them tight from the exfiltration, but I'm battling the volume and the speed of water that's getting piped in these storm sores so you don't get flooded, all down at the same stream. It's a great big balancing act. So what we're doing down there is he is going to use the wetlands, and I am looking at some filter systems. What do I mean by that? In the future, I feel that every inlet that's going to be built in a parking lot or anywhere is going to have some sort of filtering system in it before it goes into the pipe to filter out the runoff from the gas and the oil. And it's not just those things, but the dirt and the pollutants. Soil dirt and soil pollutants is just as bad as the other pollutants that we have. Problem is, there are some things to use out there, but they're very high maintenance. And again, here we go. Municipalities take over the ponds. I've had to teach them and try and do that. Suddenly I've got all these inlets. So I do have this developer. I met with him, and he's willing to try some of these things, but he doesn't want to put the burden on his homeowners. I can't really blame him, and I can't force him. So I've been working with the township to try and figure out I was looking for a model case, even if I do one inlet before it goes into the wetlands, and maybe get a group like somebody I know, maybe help me, and maybe maintain that one inlet to see how this works. And we could be a model, and maybe it won't work at all, but people could learn from that. We're also using the wetlands. Why would we use wetlands? Who even knows what a wetland is? I'll let you answer. And it's wonderful plants in these wetlands. I am not the best person in all the plant names. There's a wonderful gentleman here called Walter Darash, who's our township forester, who could tell you more about plants than you can imagine. In a wetland, the plants are very hardy, is the best way I can explain it, because they're used to surviving underwater and a lot of water coming through and back all the time. And sometimes it's murky water and mucky water. They're very hardy. So wetlands are traditionally known to be great filters. So what we're doing in this development is we're taking the water through those wetlands because it's what it's made for, and we're going to filter it through there before it gets to Chartiers Creek, down in here. Now, Chartiers Creek is a pretty large volume of water, and when you're right next to the creek, you can do a thing called no harm analysis. Why would you do that? Well, if you do a storm sewer system and you do a pond, sometimes when you hold back water, remember I talked about holding back water so it'll release slowly when there's not rain so you won't flood people downstream. That's the whole reason for these ponds, is when the rainstorm's over, it'll slowly release it. Sometimes when you put those in, it can all release down to the river or the creek at the wrong time, especially if you have a piece of property right next to it. It'll release it too fast, and you literally will cause more flooding by putting that pond in. People don't understand that when I let people do no harm analysis. They think I'm letting them get away with stormwater management. I'm not. They have to spend more money on engineering, on what we call hydrology studies, to prove where we call a hydrograph hits, to show where the flooding is, than they would for a normal developer. So I don't want them to put the facilities in because they will actually cause more harm than they will help me. And these wetlands that we're using through he did a no harm analysis, and he really proved he wouldn't flood. But he's agreed to put it through the wetlands. And honestly, will this totally work? We're not sure. I'm using this whole development as a test case. We're going to monitor and see how the wetlands survive. We're going to see how much volume goes through. I'd like to do this inlet. They did cluster development, which means that they're giving a smaller piece of the land. They have floodplain along the land, which say you can build in the floodplain, and I'll get to that in a minute. I always tell people you have enough time and money, you can build anywhere. But they're clustering together, which is another new thought process. Build the homes closer to the street so you don't disturb as much land. But then there's a balance because you're doing a lot of impervious in one area, so the volume's coming off a little quicker through the wetlands. So this whole project is going to be very interesting that's going on down there. And it's one aspect of things that I think are going to be a part of the future, where you're going to have ordinances that are going to be much more open-minded. And we have to be fair. The people want to develop their land. We have to balance. And most developers want to put their project together. If you tell them there's a rule, and you tell them they have to do this in order to get the permit or get me to sign off, it's amazing. They will say, sure, no problem, because they want to develop their project. But you have to be realistic. You can't be telling people to do things that you're not sure they're not going to work. Because then what's going to happen is, forgetting that they had to pay for it, most of it ends up in my lap maintaining it, and it's a worse problem. So there's that balance again. Some things that we're looking at, rain barrels. There was a gentleman that I'm on the Stormwater Advisory Panel for Three Rivers. He's from Canada, and they're actually putting in rain barrels at everybody's home to collect from your rain spouts. Some of them use it then for their gardens. Some of them use it. He has this plastic rain barrel design. I think it was like, I'm going to say $90. And they've been through a lot, you can see. I mean, they have the valve to open it up and the filter system. They've learned a lot of field experience, okay? And very interesting to put these in. But then the volume, they admit the big storms, when the big storms hit, it can't take it. So there's always issues to deal with. But that's an interesting thing that's going to come about. And the Stormwater Advisory Panel, they're doing demonstration programs, but very limited. And what we're looking at is some green roofs and some rain barrels. And since I'm on that panel, I hooked them up with the Environmental Education Center people because there's only two places you can do that right now. Down at the Science Center, they're going to be renovating, and they're going to put in a green roof, grass roof, those kind of things. But out at the EEC, as I call it, that's going to be one huge environmental demonstration project, and we might be able to get some money there. So I hooked them up with a lady named Mary Wilson, and hopefully that I wrote some letters. I happen to be sitting next to the director of the Science Center. I was volunteering for the Future City program. I told him, you're not going to get the money, we are. And he didn't like that. But the stormwater control facilities, if the pipes are all full, they're going to flood. And so what we have to do is best management practices as we go forward. We want to minimize the impact of development, which a person, remember, has a right to develop. We want to minimize the impact so it's a win-win situation for everybody. Facilities go in, but we keep in mind the environment downstream. Flood control systems are also part of the watershed. You may not realize it. Years ago, there was horrible flooding in Bridgeville, Carnegie, all the way down Chartiers Creek. And the water was so uncontrollable, development had occurred so quickly. So there was a flood control project put in. It's called the Chartiers Valley Flood Control Project. And my father built that project. And today there's an authority that we are still the engineers with. Upper St. Clair is part of that. Bridgeville's part of it. Carnegie, everyone along the river. And if you drive along 79, you may see this channeled, and down by Chartiers Valley High School, you'll see it also. Is it the total best management practice today? Probably not. But at that time when it was put in, what was the motivation? Protect the people. So when it was put in, it met the criteria. Now the authority exists, quite frankly. We have to inspect it by canoe every year and rowboat. That's always interesting because you can say, oh, that sounds like a great job. Well, we're not there for recreational purposes. We're trying to do the slopes. There's a lot of water in that thing. Guys have equipment. Nobody really wants to volunteer. I buy nice boats, but they don't want to volunteer. But we get grants to maintain those slopes. Believe it or not, the weeds grow into trees, and we have to get all that out of there because the purpose of that, whether it's today's best management practice or not, is to protect the people. So we can't just discard the things of the past that maybe might be the way we would have done, and we have to maintain them. So that's another cost that we all pay for. And, people around here built in the floodplain. Why? Because it's the only flat pieces of ground we got. We live in a total hilly environment. So people migrated to those flat places because they were near a stream. It's beautiful. I love going out to people's homes. They built right along the stream, and they get flooded. And, my father was great for I used to have to clean up after them, and here's why. I come to your house, and you've got totally flooded, and you have a creek in the backyard, and you're all upset, and he'll look at you and say, you bought in a creek, you live in a creek, what'd you expect? You know, and then they just explode, and we have to calm them down. But I have to deal with that now. We have homes that are there. We have people who want to build, plus the land around here is getting fewer and fewer. So we have a floodplain map at the township, and if you ever stop over and you want to see some really great maps in community development, we have all these maps on the wall: storm source, sanitary, the floodplains. We have all this stuff, the zoning map. But people can build in the floodplain. Even though FEMA, the Federal Emergency, and the state have declared these floodplains, there's rules that if you elevate your house 1.5 feet above the flood elevation, use certain materials, you're allowed to build in it. You try and get flood insurance. It's interesting. They want to build next to the creek, and when they get flooded, they want all the government and us to pay for the flood. You know, it's a balancing act, and but it's definitely an issue. The barges and the locks and dams, the barges that use the locks and dams along the river, those are all flood control projects. My community, Jefferson Hills, we have West Elizabeth right below it by the Elizabeth Bridge. They rebuilt all those locks. They changed the elevation of the entire river. That whole town of West Elizabeth was in danger of being completely, it gets flooded so many times it's not even funny. And so the U.S. Army gave money to separate the sewer system to try and prevent them from being flooded. They tied into the main sanitary sewer. Now guess what? They're getting flooded from the sanitary sewer because that was only for sanitary sewage coming from Jefferson Hills. It was agreed upon 30 years ago. They never bothered to ask me when they did it, and now I got people being flooded. And that's the famous place where I broke my leg in West Elizabeth. It was a big storm, the August 6th storm. Skip and I are out there. This poor person's getting flooded by this 36-inch storm sewer. Nobody can find it. So we go start tracing it. They bought this home. This poor person used to live by the river, got flooded their whole life, saved up enough money to go up on the hill. And there was a buried storm sewer coming under 51 that they never knew was there. It's just, I had people with backhoes and shovels trying to direct it around. We go looking for the water up above. Maybe it was in a valley, maybe it was an old trash dump, maybe my husband Skip said don't go down there, but my mayor went down there. She was going to fall into this pipe. Prime example of problems with stormwater. It's all in this valley. It was built on such a steep grade, it was acting like a sluice. It was sucking water in. The kids thought it was funny to roll a tire up, and guess what? Sucked it right in it. 200 tires in this storm sewer. She's leaning over. 20 years ago, one of the road crew died because he fell into it. Mayor's looking over. She loses her glasses. Maybe I had to grab her. Maybe I broke my leg. Maybe I had to listen to my husband all the way to the hospital. So anyways, I'm real familiar with the stormwater situation over in Jefferson Hills. And I can tell you that, think about it. They did a whole reason of that story. They did a project for flood control along the river with the locks to raise it to help the people downstream. Didn't really think about the effect right next door and above. This is what I go through every day in my job of people who haven't really lived and breathed it their whole lives and knowing there's always that effect. They don't balance right. But flood controls are things that we need, and it's part of the whole watershed, okay? Now we have streams, another part of the watershed. You've got sanitary sewers I've got to fix. I've got stormwater running everywhere. I got flood control projects, and I have streams. A lot of times infrastructures are put into the stream. A lot of times they aren't. We are very fortunate here is through Tracy's effort and the different groups, there have been a lot of grants brought in to help work on the stream. Fluvial geomorphology. That it's so difficult to say that in most of my municipalities they won't repeat it. They turn to me and say, what's that word again? It's looking at the bank streams in simplified form, planting the right plants that have those hardy roots to help slow down the soil. Putting in rock structures within the stream. You could take I think in this class, are you going to walk down the stream? Okay. And it's a hard concept for the government agencies to understand because what you do is you build very simplified rock structures to direct the water away from the banks in the middle of the stream to reduce the velocity. Think about the amount of water and the strength of it coming out of this pipe. It's coming down, it's hitting the banks, it's eroding everything. Trees erode into it. A little stream years ago is now pretty wide. So, and again, this is things we're trying. It's not perfect. I mean, it's testing through the storms. Now, I personally watch it continually, and I think it's doing a great job. However, you know, it's a learning experience. We got the grants. We have a wonderful company, Skelly & Lloyd, who does a lot of helping them. but no one ever got the permits to do it. So then they turn to me as a township engineer and say, whoops, what are we going to do? Well, I had to get the DEP people out here, and we are violating every rule they ever made up about soils and streams and erosion because we're supposed to stay away from them. And what do? I want to put a piece of material right in the middle of that stream and dig it up. Mud, muck, everything. And they had a really hard time with that. And the only way we got through it was, well, I realize I'm violating all your rules here, but the people that are up here gave us the money who think this is a good idea as a model, so let's give this a try. Okay, let's try this out. And that's really how it got through. And even now, every time we're doing different phases, I still struggle with these permits because this concept, 10 years from now, it'll probably be an everyday thing, and we will have written a book on how to do it. But it's getting that beaten up and the cost of it. You know, you only get so much money. I believe in spending all the money on doing things in the field, fixing the sanitary source, fixing the storm, fixing the stream with plants. Don't spend it on engineering. You know, that's ridiculous, and that's what was happening with some of these permits. So hopefully we're, excuse the pun, streamlining the process to get these. And the other thing is Upper St. Clair's doing a great job of it. We've got Bethel involved. Our wonderful park we're doing there now becomes the real battle, the big watershed. Remember how we flow down through everything, Bridgeville and all the other communities. We've got to get everyone working on this. But we are the model, and someone has to take the heat first out. I'm used to that my whole life with all my crazy ideas. And eventually, it's funny, you look back on it when someone said it wouldn't work, and now it's a standard thing. You know, it's a good thing when you see that. But streams are very important, and that's part of the watershed, maintaining it. But that all takes time and money. So where does our wallet fit in? Remember that wallet, that money? You know, without money, you can't do anything in life. Let's be frank about it. Well, you guys pay for the sanitary source. Remember, we talked about that through your user fee. So when you wash and you flush your toilet and you do all the things you need to do, you're paying for that use. That helps us by putting an adjustment factor on it to pay for all this work. And this work is very important. You know, not only do we want the health issue of having sanitary sewers, I need to keep them tight so they're not exfiltrating out into my streams. Phenomenal job. Upper St. Clair already has work plans in every watershed. They're not even concerned about signing the EPA consent order because we're way ahead of the game. But it takes money. And we're going to be actually floating a bond issue to do all this work. We have to. So that's the first part your wallet comes in. Storm sewers. Every development that ever went in, I would say here probably since the late 70s, most municipalities will be behind, had a storm sewer fee for every lot. You may not realize it because when you bought your lot or bought your house or you buy a house today, all these fees were already paid. Anywhere from $400 a lot up to $2,000 a lot. We require developers in different municipalities to pay for storm sewers. Why? They put the storm sewers in, but we use that money to maintain the storm sewers. We have a continuous flow of money for sanitary sewers with user fees. Storm, we do not, for the moment. All these committees I'm on, we look at other cities. Most people are paying a storm sewer fee, and I feel that's going to come region-wide for us. How is it based on? It's cut and dry. We have all this wonderful GIS maps that we've done. It's all based on how much impervious area you have. Your roof, your driveway, anything else in your house that's impervious. We calculate that up. Every lot would pay based on a fee we devise based on how much impervious area you have, because that means when it rains, that water's going in the storm sewer down into the streams, it erodes the streams, floods someone out. We then use that money to help them and fix those issues. There's a new law that went into on March 10th, just a week or so ago. Every municipality must get a permit for their storm sewer system, called an NPDES permit. We have to now maintain them. I have 1 year to complete the storm sewer maps in every community. It's a 5-year permit. We have to do tremendous educational programs. We have to get out there and teach from the kids on about when you change the oil in your car, guess where you don't put it? Not down on storm sewers. You know, you don't do those kind of things. You know, dog droppings, that's the biggest thing of all. I have 2 dogs, okay? We have to work at this every day. But that is a big pollutant. How many times have you seen people walking their dogs, and we've got them trained now to pick it up with plastic bags, but as they're walking by that little storm inlet, guess what happens? They drop it in the sewer. You'd be amazed at the bags that we have that come out of the culverts and in the parks and stuff of that. They actually, in their mind, thought they were doing the right thing. They picked it up off the ground. Not because they were thinking about the stream, they were thinking about people walking in it. And they've made it worse. So we have to educate. We have to do newsletters. We're going to use the web page. We have to get volunteers to help us with all this educational process. Then we have to take samples at every outfall of the storm source. 25% of your outfalls every year for the 5-year. 15 samples per outfall. 2 of them have to be refrigerated. Think about the concept of how this is going to be paid for. I tell you what, if you're looking for a business to invest, open a lab, because there are only 2 labs around that can handle this. And what we're looking for is everything from fecal, which is the sanitary store, to soil pollutants. There's like a whole list of things we have to look for. We are then responsible for going up the line to find out who is polluting. And then we have to get them to correct it. Well, it's going to get more interesting than just telling you to putting your oil down. I actually traced it up to you. I get up here in Mount Lebanon, or I'm draining to Mount Lebanon, or I'm draining to Bethel. Then we got to go into that community and think about all the cooperation that has to go on, or lack of cooperation. So storm sewer fees are going to become a reality. How else are we going to handle this? And these permits are in place. If anyone disturbs more, there was always an MPDS permit. If anyone disturbed more than 5 acres of land in grading when they were building something, they had to get a permit from the state. They had to get a permit from Allegheny County Soil and Erosion, where you would keep the soils and the runoffs. We don't want dirty water. And when I mean dirty water, I mean dirt, okay? A lot of people think of dirty water like sewage, but runoff from land developments can be just as detrimental. We don't want that going downstream. Everyone had to do that. The new law requires an acre or more. Anything an acre or more requires an MPDS permit, no matter what. The sad thing is, we all have to get these storm sewer permits. So 1,028 applications went into the state on March 10th. They don't have any additional personnel to review this. They tell you that. The guy who was really the spearhead of it, Mr. Patel, I taught classes with him for a couple years now, he retired in December. New people came on board. Actually, they're pretty good, but they admit, we don't know, we didn't invent this program. They actually said to me, because we were calling them so much, because I've given so many classes, and my communities want to do the right thing, they said, you know what, we're not sure of the answers, and we're sure Gateway will figure out to do the right thing, so just submit the application. It's just crazy. But that's going to take time and money. Plus, the acre to the 5 acres is going to be submitted for a permit. It's $175 for the applicant. The state will cash that, but they've decided to send it back to the municipality to review it and control it, but there'll be no money to do that. Where are we going to get that money? Storm sewer user fee. That's not going to happen overnight, but it's something that we really need to work on. And that's something that, so you have storm and sanitary. Also, where does our money fit in? We've got to maintain all these facilities. Remember I told you about the ponds and the tanks? I'm really not trying to depress you today, honest to God. I talked to my basin groups, all my councils come together as unified. I've gotten them all organized, and one night they were so depressed I felt bad because of all this funding and lack of unfunded mandates that they have. But we have the homeowners who are paying for some ponds. We have to maintain the other ones. We have to notify them. We have the flood control project, Chartiers Valley Flood Control System. Down along, we participate here in Upper St. Clair. We have all our streams here that we're trying to do fluvial geomorphology and do the earth and do the erosion. Someone has to pay for that. The streams. The thing is, when the streams become our infrastructure, which basically they have, if you think about it, just because they're not in a pipe, they are now our infrastructure. We all pay because we have to take care of that. And nobody thought of that before. They thought about the storm sewers and the tanks, but once it got to the stream, you were okay. You did your job. Stream will last forever. They've been here, what, since the beginning of time. No one thought about, you've got to take care of them or it's not going to work. But when they're left natural, there's no continuous funding mechanism. That's why these grants are good. Once you start working in the stream, you now own it. Should have pointed that out. Streams are owned by the individual property owners. Everyone who lives beside a stream owns that property. And they don't realize that. I have so many people that get flooded and come out and want the municipalities to fix everything. We don't own the stream. That's state law. But the minute I step in that stream as a borough or township engineer to do a project, the municipality now owns the stream and must maintain it. So when they're left alone, it's a real problem because property owners aren't going to maintain those. They're going to try and get somebody else. So that's an issue that people forget. That's why this is all on township property. That's why we have grants. We go further down, it's not township property. I've already been in a few of those discussions with some of those lower property owners, especially down, what do we call that, Pine Bridge? What's that down here? There's all kinds of flooding issues I have along this stream, and And the property owners want the township to come in and fix it, and I keep telling them we don't own it, but there may be some saving grace as we work our way down and get these grants, we'll be able to help them. But that takes time, and the gabions, I'm not a real big fan of gabions, they're kind of ugly, but they do work in some situations, and you have to have an open mind, and they're putting up gabions everywhere to try and make it work, but then they fall down too. Down by the ball fields, have you ever seen my gabions on the one side? Sometimes they lean this way, they lean that way. The water and the structures really are hard on them. Water is the most powerful source. You have no idea what I've seen go downstream standing there during storms. It's just amazing. It's frightening. It really is. But with that, I just want to close. I'm almost on time, 3:30. What I try to teach you today, and I could talk for hours and hours and hours, a watershed is not just the water from coming from the sky. A watershed is when it hits the ground and where it flows naturally down to a creek. That's how it got its name. There's also a thing called a soreshed. McLaughlin, Painters, Gresham, Chartiers. Most of the time they follow the watershed lines where water naturally flows. Sometimes they do not. We have pump stations that pump sewage over a watershed line because they couldn't get to a treatment facility. So there's a soreshed. But a watershed involves the water, the storm source. Then you have streams in there. Streams are owned by property owners unless we go in and work on them. Streams are in essence an infrastructure. We have storm source. We have ponds that are built for stormwater management. We have tanks. We have channels that were built. Those are all part of the infrastructure. We also have flood control. We have the flood control system that goes on. All of these make up the watershed and have to be paid for in some manner. User fees for the sanitary sewer, storm sewer fees during construction, hopefully eventually a storm sewer user fee because no other way to pay for it. But the bottom line is all these things need to be maintained because we survive on water. No matter what the source is, never forget that. And it's very important in how we balance it all. And the ending closing is balance, balance, balance. You want to live in nice places. People want to develop their land. We want the water clean. You have to go in and try and work together to balance it out for all of us for the future. And with that, do you have any questions? Sorry.